You know, the wealthiest people I've ever met were absolutely miserable, and the poorest were often radiantly happy. And before you dismiss this as romantic nonsense about noble poverty, let me tell you something that might shake your entire understanding of prosperity. The moment you stop chasing wealth, something remarkable happens. You don't become poor. You don't end up destitute. Instead, you stumble upon a kind of richness that money was always pretending to offer but could never actually deliver. And what I'm about to share with you reveals why everything you've been taught about financial success is not just wrong, but backwards. Let me start by asking you something. When did you first learn to want money? Not need it, mind you, but want it, crave it, organize your entire life around pursuing it. Chances are you were quite young when you absorbed this message. Maybe you noticed that the adults around you were anxious about money, that its presence or absence determined their mood, their choices, their sense of security. Or perhaps you watched advertisements that promised you happiness, status, attractiveness, all available for purchase if only you had enough money. And slowly, imperceptibly, you began to believe that money was not just a tool for exchange, but the key to the good life itself. This is what I call the Great Confusion, and it's one of the most devastating psychological tricks ever played on human beings. We've confused money, which is essentially a symbol, a piece of paper with numbers on it, with the things money is supposed to represent. We've mistaken the menu for the meal, the map for the territory. And in this confusion, we've begun chasing shadows while the substance slips through our fingers. Think about what money actually is. It's a medium of exchange, nothing more. A convenient way to trade your time and skills for the time and skills of others. You do something useful. You receive tokens representing that value. You exchange those tokens for other useful things. Simple, practical, functional. But somewhere along the way, we turned money into a god. We started worshiping it, sacrificing to it, organizing our entire civilization around its accumulation. And like all false gods, it demands everything while delivering nothing of real substance. Now, here's what happens when you stop chasing wealth. First, and this is crucial, you begin to see money for what it actually is. Just a tool, no more significant than a hammer or a computer. Useful, certainly, but not worthy of devotion. Not worth sacrificing your health for, or your relationships, or your peace of mind. When you stop chasing money, you can start using it instead of being used by it. I knew a man once, let's call him David, who spent 20 years climbing the corporate ladder. He worked 60, 70-hour weeks. He missed his children's childhoods. He developed ulcers, high blood pressure, chronic anxiety. And he told himself it was all worth it because he was building security, creating wealth, ensuring a comfortable future. Then one day, his company restructured and he was let go. Just like that, 2 decades of sacrifice, and he was out. No security after all. And you know what happened? He fell into a deep depression, not because of the loss of income, but because he'd organized his entire identity around his position, his salary, his net worth. He didn't know who he was without these external markers. But then something extraordinary occurred. After months of grief, after the initial shock wore off, he started to rebuild his life, not around money this time, but around meaning. He took a job that paid a fraction of what he'd been earning, but that he actually enjoyed. He started spending time with his family. He took up painting, something he'd loved as a young man, but had abandoned as impractical. And within a year, he told me something remarkable. He said, "I was chasing wealth for 20 years, and I was miserable. Now I'm not chasing anything, and I'm wealthier than I've ever been. Not in money," he clarified, "but in life." This brings us to the second thing that happens when you stop chasing wealth. You discover what you actually value, as distinct from what you've been told to value. You see, most people never ask themselves what they genuinely want. They simply absorb the ambient desires of their culture. Everyone wants a big house, an expensive car, designer clothes, exotic vacations. So they want these things too. But is this actually what they value? Or is it what they think they should value? When you stop chasing wealth, you have to get honest about this question. Because if you're not organizing your life around making as much money as possible, then what are you organizing it around? And this forces a reckoning. What do I actually care about? What brings me genuine satisfaction? What makes me feel alive? For some people, the answer might still involve financial success, but now it's coming from an authentic place rather than unconscious conditioning. They're pursuing business ventures because they love building things, not because they're desperately trying to prove their worth through their bank balance. But for many others, the answer is quite different from what they expected. They discover they value time more than money. They value creative expression more than consumption. They value depth of relationship more than breadth of possessions. They value presence more than productivity. And once you know what you actually value, you can align your life accordingly. You can make choices that serve your real priorities rather than society's imagined ones. The third transformation is perhaps the most counterintuitive. When you stop chasing wealth, you often end up with more money, not less. How can this be? It seems to violate basic logic. If you're not pursuing money, surely you'll have less of it. But this misunderstands how value actually works. You see, the person who's desperately chasing money is coming from a place of lack, of fear, of need. And this desperation makes them less effective, not more. They make poor decisions because they're thinking short term. They accept unfulfilling work because they're focused only on the paycheck. They're anxious and tight, which ironically repels the very prosperity they're seeking. But the person who's stopped chasing wealth operates from a completely different paradigm. They're doing work they find meaningful, which means they're more creative, more committed, more excellent at what they do. They're making decisions based on long-term value rather than immediate gain. They're relaxed and open, which creates space for opportunity. And paradoxically, this often leads to greater financial success. I'm not suggesting this is a strategy, mind you. I'm not saying stop chasing money as a clever technique to get more money. That would just be chasing money through the back door. What I'm describing is a genuine shift in orientation where money becomes secondary to meaning, and in that shift, money often flows more freely. It's rather like how, when you stop trying so hard to fall asleep, sleep comes naturally. When you stop gripping at wealth, it has space to arrive. Now we come to something crucial. When you stop chasing wealth, you begin to understand the difference between being rich and being wealthy. These words are often used interchangeably, but they're pointing to very different things. Being rich is about having lots of money. Being wealthy is about having what you need when you need it. Let me illustrate. Imagine someone with 10 million in the bank but who's terrified of losing it, who's constantly anxious about market fluctuations, who can't enjoy what they have because they're always worried about protecting and growing it. Are they wealthy? Not really. They're rich, but they're poor in peace, poor in contentment, poor in the ability to simply be. Now, imagine someone with modest savings, but who's skilled at creating value, who has deep relationships with generous people, who knows how to live well on little, who trusts in their own resourcefulness and in the abundance of the universe. Are they wealthy? Absolutely. They have access to what they need. They're not gripped by fear. They're not constantly calculating and worrying. This is true wealth, and it has very little to do with the numbers in your account. When you chase money, you're usually trying to become rich. You want the big number, the impressive net worth, the ability to buy anything. But when you stop chasing money, you can focus on becoming actually wealthy. You can develop skills that create value. You can build relationships based on genuine connection rather than networking. You can cultivate resourcefulness, creativity, adaptability, and these qualities make you wealthy regardless of your bank balance because they mean you can thrive in any circumstance. The fifth thing that happens is a shift in your relationship to time. When you're chasing wealth, time becomes a commodity. Every hour must be monetized, every moment evaluated for its productive potential. You're always rushing, always behind, always feeling like you're wasting time if you're not making money. This creates a poverty of time, which is perhaps the most devastating poverty of all. You might have money in the bank, but you have no time to enjoy it. You're too busy making more. But when you stop chasing wealth, time opens up. Not because you suddenly have more hours in the day, but because you're no longer treating time as something to be converted into money. You can spend an afternoon reading a book without guilt. You can have a long, meandering conversation with a friend without checking your watch. You can simply sit and watch the clouds without feeling like you're being unproductive. And in this temporal spaciousness, life becomes rich again. You begin to notice things you were too rushed to see before. The quality of light at different times of day, the subtle changes in the seasons, the expressions on people's faces, the taste of your food. These experiences don't cost money, but they're worth more than money can buy. They're what makes life worth living. Yet most people are so busy chasing wealth that they miss them entirely. They're running so fast towards some imaginary future where they'll finally have enough that they're blind to the abundance that's already here. Here's the sixth revelation, and it's one that often makes people uncomfortable. When you stop chasing wealth, you have to confront what you were really chasing. Because for most people, it's not actually money they're after. Money is just a proxy for something deeper, something harder to name. For some, it's security. They believe that if they just had enough money, they'd finally feel safe. But this is a fantasy. There's never enough to feel truly secure because the fear isn't about money, it's about the fundamental uncertainty of existence. No amount of wealth can protect you from illness, from loss, from death. For others, money represents achievement, proof of worth. They're trying to demonstrate through their net worth that they matter, that they're successful, that they're somebody. But again, this doesn't work. No matter how much they accumulate, the inner sense of inadequacy remains because money was never the real issue. The real issue is a belief that they're not enough as they are, and still others are chasing money as a form of freedom. They think if they were wealthy enough, they could finally do what they want, be who they really are. But what they discover, if they ever get there, is that money doesn't grant this kind of freedom. In fact, the more money you have, the more you often become enslaved to protecting and managing it. Real freedom comes from needing less, not having more. When you stop chasing wealth, all of this becomes visible. You have to face what you were actually seeking, and this can be painful. But it's also liberating because once you see that money can't deliver what you really want, you can start pursuing those things directly. You want security? Cultivate inner resilience. You want to feel worthy? Do the psychological work to recognize your inherent value. You want freedom? Simplify your needs. The seventh transformation is about generosity, and it might surprise you. When you're chasing wealth, generosity becomes nearly impossible. Oh, you might make charitable donations for tax purposes or to maintain a certain image, but real generosity, the kind that comes from an open heart, is blocked by the scarcity mindset that drives wealth accumulation. The wealth chaser is always calculating. Is this a good investment? What will I get in return? Am I being taken advantage of? They cannot give freely because they're operating from the assumption that there isn't enough, that everything is a transaction, that you must protect what you have or risk losing it. But when you stop chasing wealth, generosity becomes natural. Not because you have more to give, necessarily, but because you're no longer gripped by fear of not having enough. You can share your time, your skills, your resources without needing something in return. And here's the beautiful part. This generosity doesn't deplete you. It enriches you. There's a kind of circulation that happens when you give freely. What you offer flows out into the world and comes back in unexpected forms. Not because of some magical law of attraction, but simply because generosity creates goodwill, builds community, opens relationships. When you're known as someone who gives freely, people naturally want to give to you, not in a calculated exchange, but from genuine appreciation. I've watched this pattern repeat countless times. The person who's tight with their money, who's always calculating and protecting, ends up isolated and struggling, while the person who gives freely, who trusts in abundance, ends up supported by a web of reciprocal generosity. Now we arrive at the eighth thing that happens, and it's perhaps the most profound. When you stop chasing wealth, you begin to see through the entire game. You realize that our economic system is built on a fundamental lie, the lie that happiness can be purchased, that security can be guaranteed, that meaning can be bought. This system needs you to be perpetually dissatisfied, always wanting more, always feeling like what you have isn't quite enough. Because if you were satisfied, if you felt complete, you'd stop consuming. You'd stop striving. You'd stop participating in the endless cycle of production and consumption that keeps the whole machine running. And this threatens everything our society is built upon. So you're bombarded with messages designed to create desire, to manufacture dissatisfaction. Advertisers show you beautiful people with perfect lives and imply that you too could have this if only you bought their product. Social media shows you everyone else's highlight reels and makes you feel inadequate by comparison. The news focuses on scarcity and crisis to keep you anxious and afraid. All of it is designed to keep you chasing, striving, never quite arriving. But when you stop chasing wealth, you step out of this game. You see it for what it is. And from outside the game, you can see how absurd it all is. People working jobs they hate to buy things they don't need to impress people they don't like. People sacrificing their health, their relationships, their present happiness for a future that never quite arrives. People with everything money can buy, but nothing that actually satisfies. Once you see this clearly, you cannot unsee it, and you cannot go back to playing the game unconsciously. The ninth and final transformation is this. When you stop chasing wealth, you discover what it means to be truly prosperous. And prosperity, real prosperity, has nothing to do with the size of your bank account. Prosperity is a relationship to life itself. It's the felt sense that you have enough, that you are enough, that life is abundant and generous and supportive. A prosperous person can be materially poor by conventional standards, but feel rich in every moment because they're attuned to the incredible wealth that's freely available. The wealth of a sunrise, of a good conversation, of a meal shared with friends, of work that feels meaningful, of a body that mostly works, of a mind that can think and create and wonder. None of this can be purchased, yet all of it is infinitely valuable. When you're chasing wealth, you're blind to this natural prosperity. You're too focused on what you don't have to appreciate what you do have. You're too oriented toward the future to be present with the abundance of now. But when you stop chasing, when you simply open your eyes and look around, you realize you're already living in almost unimaginable prosperity. You have more luxury than ancient kings. You have access to more information than the greatest scholars of previous centuries. You have technologies that would seem like magic to your ancestors. And more than that, you have this moment, this breath, this conscious experience of being alive. You have the sun on your skin and the air in your lungs and the capacity to feel joy and love and wonder. What is all this worth? How much money would you need to purchase it? It's priceless. And it's already yours. So here we are, having traced the journey from chasing wealth to discovering true prosperity. And perhaps you're feeling something shift inside you, a recognition that you've been running after something that was never going to satisfy you, that the thing you really wanted was available all along. What happens when you stop chasing wealth? You wake up to the game you've been playing, to the lies you've been believing, to the abundance that's been here all along. You don't become poor. You become rich in the ways that actually matter, in time and attention and presence and peace. And yes, you might also become materially comfortable, but now it's a side effect of living well rather than the primary goal. The question isn't whether you should stop chasing wealth. The question is whether you're ready to discover what you're actually seeking, what you actually need, what actually makes life worth living. Because I promise you, it's not another zero in your bank account. It's not the bigger house, or the fancier car, or the more impressive title. It's right here, right now, available in this very moment, if only you'd stop running long enough to notice. The great secret is this: you already have everything you need to be happy, to be fulfilled, to live a meaningful life. You just can't see it while you're busy chasing what you think you need. So stop chasing. Look around, and prepare to be astonished by the wealth that's been here all along, patiently waiting for you to come home.